The most dangerous thing happening to the US military right now isn't a new weapon. It's the possibility that its greatest advantages no longer work the way it expects. The F-35 isn't becoming obsolete, it's becoming predictable. Virginia-class submarines aren't being easily detected. They're being quietly tracked in ways that weren't possible before. And the country pushing this shift isn't trying to win a fair fight. China is building something else entirely. Not just weapons, but a system designed to break how the US fights. A system that turns stealth, distance, and even the ocean itself into vulnerabilities. In this video, we're going to walk through the 5 steps of that shift. How stealth starts to fail, how the underwater domain stops being safe, and how control in the Western Pacific can slip without a single shot being fired. Stick around until the end to see the full strategic picture. What China has achieved might be far more advanced than you think. Chapter 1. The Ghost Hunters. For decades, the United States Air Force has been built on a single belief, an unwritten rule that whoever owns stealth controls the fight. Stealth was never just about technology, it was psychological dominance. The Pentagon believed that platforms like the F-35 Block 4 or the B-21 Raider could penetrate any air defense system, strike targets deep inside hostile territory, and leave before the enemy even realized what happened. That entire doctrine rested on one assumption: that stealth could defeat traditional X-band radar. But over the past few years, something has shifted in the Pacific. China didn't try to solve the X-band problem. They walked around it. If you want to understand what is actually worrying the Pentagon right now, don't look at headlines. Look at the hardware the People's Liberation Army is actually deploying. Let's take a look at exactly what China has built. Systems like the JY-27A and YLC-8E aren't small rotating radar dishes. They are massive fixed phased array installations operating in the VHF and UHF bands. And that choice is not accidental. Now imagine 2 different types of radar waves. The first is high-frequency radar with short wavelengths. This is exactly what the F-35 was designed to defeat, with radar-absorbing materials, airframe shaping, and sharp angles all engineered to scatter those waves away so they don't return to the radar. But VHF works differently. Its wavelengths stretch from 1 to 3 meters, roughly the same scale as parts of the aircraft itself. When those waves hit an aircraft like the F-35, they don't simply bounce off or get absorbed. They wrap around the entire airframe, flow along the wings, fuselage, and tail, and begin to resonate with the aircraft's physical structure. Instead of disappearing, the signal comes back. Not clean, not precise, but strong enough to reveal something critical. Something is there. And at certain angles, it can appear almost as large as a commercial airliner on a radar screen. On a PLA radar screen, the stealth profile starts to collapse. The aircraft doesn't look invisible, it looks exposed, sometimes as visible as something the size of a commercial airliner. For years, the Pentagon reassured itself with one limitation. Yes, VHF radar could detect stealth aircraft, but it lacked the precision to guide a missile. Knowing something is there is not the same as being able to shoot it. China understood that, and that's where the second breakthrough happens. Not in a single radar, but in how everything connects. This is where the kill chain changes. Instead of relying on one sensor, Beijing built a multi-static network, a layered system where detection, tracking, and targeting are distributed across platforms. Ground-based VHF radar detects anomalies. Type 055 destroyers collect electromagnetic signatures, and KJ-500 aircraft fuse everything into a real-time picture. Individually, each signal is weak and uncertain, but combined, they become a coherent 3D picture. This is no longer about one radar locking onto one aircraft. It's about an entire network reconstructing your position piece by piece. And once that picture stabilizes, the hunt begins silently. There's no need for fighters to turn on radar, no need to reveal presence. Targeting data is passed directly into long-range missiles like the PL-15 or PL-17. The PL-15 and the ultra-long-range PL-17 represent a fundamental shift in aerial combat, specifically designed as AWACS killers to strike high-value assets from over 300 miles away. Equipped with advanced AESA radar seekers and dual-pulse rocket motors, these missiles can intercept targets far beyond the reach of current U.S. counterparts, effectively forcing American tankers and command aircraft to retreat from the front lines. Their lethality lies in their integration with China's sensor network, allowing them to be launched silently and guided toward a target that never even sees the threat coming. But even that may not be the limit. In October 2025, the game changed forever when China's CETC announced the mass production of a critical breakthrough: the superconducting single-photon detector. This isn't just another radar. It's the heart of a quantum sensing system that operates on a brutal law of physics. Traditional radar works like an echo. You shout into a canyon and wait for the sound to bounce back. If the canyon walls are lined with foam, or in this case, stealth coating, there is no echo. You are tricked into believing the space is empty. But China's breakthrough leverages a haunting law of physics called quantum entanglement. The system creates billions of twin photon particles with an invisible, instantaneous link. The radar station holds onto one particle and fires its twin into the sky. The moment that traveling particle strikes an F-35, its state changes. Because of the quantum link, its twin, back at the station, changes simultaneously and instantaneously. Here is the kicker. The radar doesn't need to wait for a signal to bounce back. It only has to look at the particle in its own hand. If that particle flinches, the system knows with 100% certainty that something is out there. America's multi-billion-dollar stealth coating can absorb radio waves, but it cannot sever a quantum connection. By weaponizing the particle-level properties of quantum entanglement, China has achieved a generational leap in sensing, detecting ultra-low observable targets without relying on a single bounce of traditional radar reflection. But the sky is only half the story. Beneath the surface, something even more dangerous is happening. Chapter 2: The Transparent Ocean. If the skies are no longer safe, the Pentagon has always believed there was still one sanctuary where the United States held an absolute advantage: the deep ocean. For decades, especially since the Cold War, American attack submarines like the Virginia class have been the true ghosts of modern warfare. Their lethality doesn't come from raw firepower, it comes from silence. The ocean is vast, dark, and chaotic, filled with natural currents, marine life, and thermal layers that bend sound in unpredictable ways, making the task of finding a sub in the Pacific feel less like a search and more like trying to locate a needle in an entire galaxy. For years, the assumption in Washington was simple. No matter how many surface ships China builds, U.S. boats can still slip in close, strike without warning, and vanish. But by 2026, Beijing is proving a terrifyingly different principle. If you can't find the needle, drain the ocean. China isn't just building better anti-submarine ships. They are weaponizing the entire underwater environment into a massive sensing grid. Western intelligence calls a critical part of this effort the Great Underwater Wall. This isn't a physical barrier. It's a vast network of seabed-mounted sonar arrays stretching across the South China Sea and along the First Island chain, where thousands of ultra-sensitive hydrophones are anchored to the ocean floor and tethered by fiber optic cables to shore-based data centers. Every vibration in the water, every micro-anomaly in acoustic patterns, is recorded. Even the faint turbulence created by a pump jet propulsion system, the very tech used on elite US subs, can be detected under the right conditions. But detection is only the beginning. This raw acoustic data is fed into centralized AI processing units, where it's cross-referenced against an ever-growing library of acoustic signatures. Every submarine class leaves a fingerprint, and over time, those fingerprints are becoming impossible to hide. However, Beijing knows that passive listening isn't enough. The ocean is filled with blind spots, underwater ridges, deep trenches, and thermoclines where sharp temperature shifts create acoustic shadows. These zones have always been a submarine commander's best friend, the ultimate places to vanish. That is why, for over a decade, China's oceanographic survey fleets, like the Xiangyang class, have operated tirelessly across the Western Pacific and Indian Ocean. On paper, they are conducting scientific research, but the data tells a darker story. They are mapping the seabed in extreme resolution, charting currents, and identifying every single acoustic blind zone. In short, they are building the most detailed underwater battlespace map in human history. And when you own the map, you control the fight. This is how the underwater kill chain activates. Imagine a Virginia-class sub approaching the first island chain, moving slow and silent, exactly as designed. Somewhere on the seabed, a passive sensor flags an anomaly. Not a clear signal, just a hitch in the background noise. Instead of sending a noisy destroyer to investigate and alert the sub, China deploys something far more surgical. Unmanned underwater vehicles, UUVs, like the HSU-001. These are large, autonomous, battery-powered ghosts that drift along the seabed. They don't rush, they listen. When they get close enough, they emit brief, surgical, active sonar pulses, just enough to fix a position, but not enough to give themselves away. Once the coordinates are locked, the net tightens. Overhead, a KQ-200 maritime patrol aircraft moves into position, using its magnetic anomaly detector to scan for disruptions in the Earth's magnetic field. The unmistakable signature of a massive metallic object moving through the deep. Once confirmed, sonobuoys are dropped to form a localized tracking cage. Then come the weapons. Lightweight anti-submarine torpedoes, capable of homing in from multiple vectors. The predator has become the prey. The real terror here isn't just the loss of a hull, it's the loss of what that submarine represents. Silence. For half a century, silence was America's ultimate strategic shield. If that silence is compromised, everything changes. Commanders hesitate. Subs stay farther out. Operations slow down. The window of surprise slams shut. The United States doesn't need to lose a submarine to lose its advantage. It only needs to lose confidence in its ability to remain unseen. When the deep ocean is no longer a sanctuary, it becomes a contested domain, just like the skies above. At this moment, the two pillars of American military doctrine, stealth in the air and invisibility under the sea, begin to collapse. But even these systems, the massive radar nets and the underwater sensors, mean nothing unless they are tested in the real world. And China has found the perfect laboratory: Taiwan. Chapter 3: The Live Rehearsal. For years, the United States has been fixated on one scenario: a massive amphibious invasion of Taiwan. Thousands of troops crossing the strait, warships pushing through missile fire, a modern-day D-Day unfolding on the beaches. Why Taiwan matters. Taiwan is more than just a disputed island. It is the juggernaut of the first island chain. For Beijing, seizing Taiwan means shattering the shackles currently locking the Chinese Navy in. opening a direct gateway for their nuclear submarine fleets to vanish into the deep waters of the Pacific, unhindered and undetected. Every major drill around Taiwan, especially operations like Joint Sword, is not just a show of force, it's a stress test, a real-world measurement of how well their kill chain performs under pressure. So what actually happens when one of these exercises begins? First, long-range rocket artillery systems like the PHL-191 are deployed along China's southeastern coastline. With ranges reaching up to 300 miles, they don't need to fire to be effective. They define space. They create a denial zone across the Taiwan Strait, a wall of potential firepower that cuts off movement toward the west. At the same time, Chinese naval forces don't charge directly toward Taiwan's coastline. Instead, they maneuver east of the island, into the open Pacific. That move is not about Taiwan, it's about the United States. Type 052D destroyers and Type 055 cruisers establish a forward defensive line. Their radar systems scan outward, not inward. They are waiting for something else to appear, a carrier strike group. This is the A2AD layer coming online in real time, anti-access and area denial, not to destroy everything that enters the zone, but to make entering the zone unacceptable. Meanwhile, deep inland, something even more critical is happening. The People's Liberation Army Rocket Force begins mobilizing its anti-ship ballistic missile units, DF-21D and DF-26. Mobile launchers leave hardened shelters and move into pre-surveyed firing positions, coordinates already calculated, firing solutions already prepared. The trap is not being built, it's being activated. But what makes this system especially dangerous is not just its military capability, it's its ambiguity. In recent exercises, China has deployed Coast Guard vessels, massive ships, in some cases larger than U.S. destroyers, into contested waters. They don't look like warships. They don't behave like warships. They conduct inspections, board civilian vessels, and enforce what they call maritime regulations. Now the question shifts, not tactical, but political. Would the United States open fire on a Coast Guard ship and risk triggering a global war over what appears to be a law enforcement action? That is the pressure point. Every time China runs these exercises, they are reducing uncertainty for themselves and increasing it for Washington. Because this is not just about capability, it's about timing, about response. China is collecting data, real data. They are measuring how long it takes for U.S. reconnaissance aircraft like the RC-135 to respond from Okinawa. They are tracking how carrier strike groups based in Yokosuka reposition under different levels of tension. They are observing how U.S. forces communicate, coordinate, and escalate. Every movement is logged, every delay is recorded, every pattern is studied. And with each iteration, their system becomes smoother, faster, more precise. This is not a rehearsal for invasion, it's a rehearsal for control. If Taiwan becomes isolated, not by force but by sustained pressure, the strategic consequences are immediate. Supply chains collapse, energy flow is disrupted, economic pressure builds, and all of it happens without a single decisive battle. That's where the real fear emerges. The United States is pushed into a dilemma with no clean solution. And once this system proves it can work around Taiwan, there is no reason for it to stay there. Because once a constrictor learns how to close its grip, it doesn't stop at one target. It expands outward across the Western Pacific. And that's where the next layer of fear begins. Not the loss of a battle, but the loss of an entire region. Chapter 4. The Kill Zone. Exercises and political posturing only go so far. But there is a line where geometry takes over, where presence becomes pressure, and that line is drawn by distance. In the Western Pacific, distance is not neutral. It is a trap designed to weaponize time and space against the United States. Imagine China's A2AD not as a wall, but as a three-layered kill funnel, tightening around any carrier that dares to advance. The first layer begins at the edge of space with the high-altitude net, a persistent surveillance grid that ensures you are never truly alone. Before a single shot is fired, You are being watched by the Yaogan satellite constellation, a massive orbital network of optical, cloud-piercing radar and electronic sniffers that provide constant coverage of the ocean's surface. Supporting them from deep inland are over-the-horizon radars, behemoth installations that bounce signals off the ionosphere to see around the curvature of the Earth, detecting ships over 3,000 kilometers away. The terrifying reality is that they don't need a perfect lock. They only need continuity, because as long as you never fully disappear from their screens, a firing solution is already being calculated in a bunker 1,000 miles away. As you move within 1,000 miles of the coast, the second layer activates through China's forward nodes. This is the domain of the Type 055 Rehearsal class cruiser, widely considered the most powerful surface combatant in the world today. This 13,000-ton monster is equipped with a dual-band AESA radar system that can track hundreds of targets simultaneously, from sea-skimming missiles to low observable stealth aircraft. The Type 055 is not just a ship, it is a distributed sensing node that fills every gap in the satellite net, stabilizing target tracks and feeding real-time data back to the mainland's missile batteries. Then, the trap snaps shut as you enter the third layer, the saturation strike zone. This is where you face the DF-21D and the DF-26, the world's first anti-ship ballistic missiles specifically engineered to kill carriers from the edge of space. Unlike traditional cruise missiles, these weapons exit the atmosphere before re-entering at a staggering Mach 10, using maneuverable re-entry vehicles to adjust their flight path in the final seconds to hit a moving ship. But the real danger isn't one missile, it's the coordinated swarm. Beijing will launch a synchronized barrage where DF-26s plunge from the stratosphere, while YJ-12 supersonic cruise missiles launched from H-6J bombers scream in from the horizon at 3 times the speed of sound. Even the U.S. Navy's legendary Aegis defense system has a breaking point, and that point is defined by magazine depth. In this high-speed exchange, China can use cheaper, mass-produced missiles to force American destroyers to burn through their limited supply of multi-million-dollar SM-6 interceptors. It is a brutal war of attrition where, once your magazine is empty, a $13 billion carrier becomes a defenseless target. China doesn't need to sink the fleet to win. They only need to make the cost of staying in the kill zone unacceptable. By forcing carriers to retreat beyond their effective strike range, China wins the battle of distance without firing a single shot, tilting the balance of power in the Pacific quietly, but decisively. Chapter 5: The War of Time. Everything we've discussed so far, from the ghost hunters in the sky to the transparent oceans and the A2AD kill funnel, leads to one final, brutal bottleneck: time. In modern high-end warfare, victory doesn't go to the side that hits the hardest in the opening round. It goes to the side that can still keep punching after the first exchange. For decades, the United States has gambled its entire existence on a single doctrine: precision. The logic was simple. We don't need thousands of dumb bombs if we have one smart missile that never misses. Fewer platforms, higher capability, unmatched accuracy. In a short, limited conflict, this doctrine is invincible. But what happens when the war doesn't end in the first 72 hours? This is where the conversation shifts from tactical brilliance to industrial reality. While America spent years perfecting its silver bullets, China was building a war machine of scale. They aren't just manufacturing weapons, they are running a wartime production system in the middle of peace. China's shipyards are churning out hulls at a rate the Pentagon hasn't seen since the height of World War II. Their missile assembly lines aren't designed for rarity, they are designed for saturation. Imagine the Pacific a week into the conflict. A U.S. carrier strike group has intercepted every incoming threat. The Aegis shield is holding, but every SM-6 interceptor fired is a permanent hole in a finite magazine that cannot be refilled at sea. Meanwhile, across the horizon, China's factories are still breeding new missiles to replace the ones they just lost. Internal U.S. assessments have whispered a terrifying possibility. In a high-intensity conflict, the United States could burn through its entire stockpile of key precision munitions in less than 7 days. 1 week to exhaust the legacy of decades of accumulation. When that threshold is crossed, the American way of war collapses. Precision disappears. The system doesn't break all at once, it loses its rhythm. Commanders start to hesitate, not because they lack courage, but because they are terrified of running out of bullets for tomorrow. You stop hunting, you start hoarding. And that is exactly when the momentum tilts. Not because the adversary is better, but because their system was built to outlast yours. Ending the silent tilt. You don't lose a modern war with a single explosion. You lose it in phases. First comes the doubt, when stealth is exposed and the ocean is no longer a sanctuary. Then comes the lag, when decisions take longer because the margin for error has vanished. And finally, the paralysis, when the shadow of depletion looms over every strategic move. This transformation isn't a future prophecy, it is a current reality. It's a gradual rebalancing driven by technology, accelerated by scale, and solidified by time. The most dangerous part isn't that China is getting stronger. It's that the balance of power shifted long before anyone was willing to admit it. The era of absolute American supremacy didn't end with a bang. It ended when the math changed. And by the time the world finally realizes it, the window to respond may have already slammed shut.